All right.
Hi. Thank you all out there for joining us, all proud UNO alumni. I'm Rachel Massey. I'm the director of the UNO Alumni Association. We're so grateful to have you all here with us to kick off our inaugural webinar series. So we're launching a series of virtual Meet Us at events where we can get information to you, both educational and fun. This one's obviously a very informational and timely session. We've brought with us today two speakers, panelists who are going to be assisting in answering your questions regarding small business owner resources during this time of COVID. Chris Supranat is the director at UNO of the Urban Entrepreneurship and Policy Institute, and I'll allow him to give a little more background in a moment. We're also joined with Lynette White-Cullen, who's the Vice President of the Small Business Ecosystem Development at the New Orleans Business Alliance. So thank you both very much for joining us. This is a topic we've had a lot of interest in and are very excited to address today. So just a few housekeeping items for all the attendees. We are going to be answering questions via the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Chris and Lynette will pause at a few various points in the presentation to field questions, and I'll be feeding them your questions from that Q&A function. So if you could use that, I'd appreciate it, and we will try and get to all of your questions within the next hour. So thank you, and I'll leave it for now to Chris and Lynette.
Yeah, so I'm Chris Supranat, director of the Urban Entrepreneurship and Policy Institute. Over the past couple of weeks, we've been working with a number of business owners. Perhaps some of you have reached out to me to help you apply for PPP loans and otherwise try to walk you through various processes to get at some of the funding that's been made available to you. We're also putting some resources together in the community for people who need, say, tax help or legal advice or connecting to CPAs or other services that you could use at a time like this to not just try to keep your business afloat for right now and keep yourself going, but also to really put yourself in the best position possible going forward. That's one of the things that we're trying to stress is that we know all of you are entrepreneurs. And so this, in many ways, it's a very tough time for a lot of people. It's a very tough time for all of you. But obviously, one of the things we want to do is put you in the best position to be successful. So it's not just about stopping the bleeding, but also figuring out how do we come out of this crisis stronger than we were before. So we're here to try to help connect you with those resources. And one of those resources is Lynette and other folks at NOLBA. So Lynette, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Well, thank you guys for including me. This is very exciting. I am a UNO alum and working in the business community here in New Orleans. I do small business work for the New Orleans Business Alliance, and we are the public-private partnership with the City of New Orleans, tasked with doing economic development for the city. And my role is helping small businesses to be able to access the resources that they need and helping them to grow and looking at some of the trends and keeping up with things for our small businesses so that they can spend the time to work on their businesses. And then we help them with, environmental resources and all of the things, that we know will help to impact and grow their businesses. And so I'm very excited to be here today.
Rachel, how do you want to do it? Should we start taking some of the questions? That might be the most productive way of moving forward. Oh,
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. And I know I'm just a ghost voice right here, but I think that's okay.
So Lynette, we got sent some questions. Why don't we just go through these? Let me pull it. If you're sort of seeing my eyes drifting around, it's because I'm trying to pull up the questions that we.
Yeah. Well, I know a lot of people are asking about the SBA loan resources. What other loans and grant programs, are available for small businesses. I mean, that's the majority of the questions that we get at the Business Alliance. So we've been trying to keep up with, a lot of that information. And thankfully, we'll be getting more money into those programs. So we'll start to see, applications available again for businesses to apply the businesses that haven't been able to access those resources. So, I mean, two of the major programs that came out of the CARES Act are the SBA EIDL loans, economic injury disaster loans. And that program will allow a business owner to access up to $2 million in loan funds at 3 3/4%. Sort of the real issue with this is that it really is a loan. It is going to be underwritten, so there are, you know, considerations for credit. There will be collateral that may be required. I mean, you will have to be able to demonstrate that you will be able to repay this loan. But, you know, if you've been injured because of, you know, COVID, you know, your business has any disruption, then you certainly can apply for that. And then subsequent to starting the program, they actually added a grant component to it, where initially, and I'll just say that so much information is changing, and it's changing so rapidly. And so, which is why one of the things that, you know, I've been spending a lot of my time doing is keeping up with the programs and keeping up with all the changes that are being made. So with the grant program, initially they said, you know, anybody who applied for these EIDL loans, we're going to give you a $10,000 grant, whether your loan is approved or not. And we're going to send you this grant within 3 days. Well, I don't know anybody yet who's gotten the money in 3 days. And it's been probably 10 days since that was said. And then since then, they've even changed that component to say, well, it's not 10,000, it's up to 10,000 based on $1,000 per employee that you employ in your company. And that only includes W-2 employees. So if you're paying independent contractors or, you know, providing 1099s, those persons are not considered employees in your organization. And so you can't include them when you're asking for funding for your payroll. So what we heard is that from one of the public information officers is that any application that they received prior to April 15th will still receive the grant. So it's unclear now as to whether or not when they add the new funding to the program, if the grant part of it will still be relevant. But, you know, what we heard was that any application that they receive before April 15th will still be eligible for the grant portion of that program.
Can I ask you a question? So let's say that you own a small business right now, and let's say that you've either applied for PPP funding and you're sort of in the pipeline, kind of waiting for it to be funded again, right? And as someone just commented, you know, even if they inject, you know, what they're looking to inject, it's probably not going to last. You know, he says 3 or 4 days, maybe a week at most.
Right.
Let's say that you're in the position of you're an independent contractor, or you're running a business with 3 to 5 employees right now. If that's you, what would you be doing right now?
I would be putting together everything that I'm going to need to apply for that loan when that loan becomes available again. So reach out to PPP. Yeah, on PPP. So the PPP loans, or the loans that will be forgiven for 8 weeks of your payroll, along with some of your rent, mortgage, or utilities, basically to stabilize companies very short term. But because it is a forgivable loan, I mean, it's the kind of loan that our businesses really need right now. So I'm going to say, because, again, the funding is still limited, even though they're, putting a lot more into the program, we got to realize that we're servicing businesses from around the country, not just in our city or our state. So many businesses are impacted that, no, the money's not going to last that long. So I would say, begin getting all of your information together, right? So you should be looking at your last 12 months of payroll and figuring out what is that average payroll. Now, payroll actually includes not just the salary that you pay your employees, but if you're paying for any health benefits, if you're paying into a retirement account on their behalf, if you're paying profit sharing, any of those things will be included. So salary cap is at $100,000. So any employees that you pay up to $100,000, that will be the salary cap. But any amounts that you pay towards those benefits, health benefits, or profit sharing, or retirement accounts, that can be added on top of the 100,000.
Great.
So once you come up with the average payroll, what you're going to do is multiply that by 2.5 times. So basically, the 2 in that represents your 2 months of payroll that they're going to give you. The 0.5 is going to represent all of that other stuff that they said you could pay for, like your rent or your mortgage, or your utility payments, things like that. So yeah, I would firmly start to get that information together, because once you're able to do your application, and most banks now have an online process, you'll be ready to put that information in. So there is a copy of the actual application, so you could actually see what's going to be, what questions are going to be asked. You can prepare your application now. So as soon as, the start button is pushed and you're able to, start putting in your application, you'll have everything ready to go. I mean, that's the best advice I could give any business owner right now.
Yeah, to anyone who wants to do that, Lynette's forwarded me the packet. We've got all that information. So if you want to reach out to me, I can get you that right now. So you'll be ready to go. That includes a worksheet where you can type in all of your salaries, everything that Lynette was just talking about. Just send me an email. It'll be up on the UNO Alumni Association website. There was an email sent out a couple of days ago, last week, that had my contact information. We can get that to you. One other question, Lynette. So beyond the PPP, what else would you suggest someone doing? There's someone who asked in the chat about the sole proprietor who lost sales due to COVID to apply for relief under the Pandemic Unemployment Assistance Program. Do you know anything about that, or do you know other resources that folks could be accessing right now in addition to the PPP, or other steps that they should be taking?
Right. So I would say, and what I do almost every morning is I just do a Google search for grants for small businesses, assistance programs for small businesses. So I mean, the U.S. Chambers, and the thing is, all of these programs, you've got to jump on them really, really quickly. The U.S. Chambers put out a $5,000 grant program for small businesses. They got 16,000 applications in minutes. It crashed their site. So, as much as you can find out about these programs early on, Verizon has a small business grant program that they're going to be doing. And some of it is targeted to New Orleans. And, I'll be happy to send out any information that I have as well. But I would just say, you really, because there's a lot of, companies, that have decided, based on what these companies do, like Susan Blakely, who owns the Spanx company, she has a grant program for women. They've done one phase of it. They're going to do another phase. So as you start to look for those programs and where you see them, many of them require you to register. And then after you register, they send you information about when the grant process opens up. But, from those websites, you can, obtain what the requirements are, what you're going to have to put in place. So I'm just going to say, start putting all of those resources in place and make sure that you have that financial information and all of those things, ready and ready to go. You should have your tax return sitting somewhere where you could pull information from it, because that's mainly how people will derive, your business income. So all of those things that you could just have at the ready, it's just going to help you to be able to access some of these programs, first and foremost. And then, of course, the state of Louisiana also has a loan program that they're doing where you can borrow up to $100,000. The state is guaranteeing, they're putting up a $50 million loan guarantee pool for banks around the state, which they're going to be guaranteeing 20% of those loans. So again, it's not a given that everybody will get this loan, because banks are doing the loans using their own underwriting criteria. So, there will be credit considerations, there will be collateral that may be required, but, it's a $100,000 loan that you can get at 3.5%. There are no payments due for 6 months. They won't accrue any interest for the first 6 months. Now the banks have the option to do a loan term up to 5 years, but that really is up to them. And, based on, what they're looking at in your qualifications, they may do something in the neighborhood of 2 years or 3 years. But, the state is asking them, to consider 5 years. And the state has also asked them to, try to do a more streamlined application so that people are not having to, provide so much documentation. But yeah, those are some programs, that are available for people who are in the arts. There's a lot of arts organizations that are providing some grants. I know Ashe Cultural Arts Center was doing some $2,000 grants for culture workers. That was here locally. But then, look into the philanthropy world, because there are also some of the philanthropic organizations, based on what they support, they're sometimes putting out grants, and it may be grants that they put out through some of their grantees, but that information you can find like on their websites. So I would say that's just a good place to start. Just start, Googling, where are these grant programs for small businesses? And if you can put in more industry specific information, it might give you, a more concise search, around what you do in your business.
And as Lynette says, there are a lot of people that are tapping into these resources right now. And so the more you can have your material ready to go. We sent out a survey request through the Alumni Association, and with 2 days, 3 days, we had 700 people. So, I'm still trying to process about $25,000 of $40 payments. It's crazy the amount of overload on this. Someone asked about whether a business needs to apply for the PPP to get a grant. I'm not quite sure what that question, but you've got to apply. Obviously, and then the PPP, those are all forgivable within the certain percentage, right? So you're going to get your 8 weeks of salary, and the 250% that Lynette was talking about, that's part of the forgivable loan. But again, we can send you all of that information. It's going to depend on the structure. Lynette, did you have something to add on that?
But Chris, I think maybe the question he's asking is about the grant that's attached to the economic injury.
That's a different question. Yeah, I was looking at Sierra.
Right, and yeah, actually, there is an express loan application and it's 2 separate applications. So for anybody who applied initially for the EIDL loan, they had to go back and apply for the express loan. But you actually can apply for that express loan without applying for the EIDL loan. But also know that if the reason you're saying you're applying for the express loan or the EIDL loan is to make your payroll, to pay for your employees, then you have to realize part of what's forgivable in the PPP loan will offset that amount, right? So if you were able to borrow, say, $50,000 from the EIDL loan because you wanted to make your payroll, and then you apply for the PPP loan, then the $50,000, will actually not be forgiven as part of that, because the government will look at that as like what they call double dipping, right? And that you can't use money from 2 different government programs for the same purpose. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
The PPP is a combination forgivable loan and pay backable loan, depending on how much you get and where you're spending it and what you do with your employment numbers, right? So that's all in the worksheets. And so you can apply for the amount that ultimately gets forgiven if you spend it in the way that you need to for that to be forgiven. But then there are obviously other types of paybackable loans that you have access to if you need the capital. That's the response to Mrs. Martinez there, who was asking about the CEO from the medical device company. I think the other side of this too is that, and Lynette, maybe you can talk about this as well, is that it's tough. Look, this situation is really tough right now. I get that. But one side of this too is also not just thinking about how to play defense, but also how to play offense. How can you be repositioning your business and what you're doing, knowing that we're going to be encountering a different environment going forward, at least for the foreseeable future? What is it that you're going to be able to do to profit from this? Because it's not. Part of it is if you're getting a loan, you're going to have to pay it back. So. I don't know. Lynette, maybe you can, what are you seeing with small businesses you're working with right now? Part of me hopes the ones that we're working with aren't just saying, well, I hope it's going to go back to what it was, because It might, but this is kind of like Katrina, right? I mean, 15 years later, 10 years later, we're kind of back to what it was. But if you were in New Orleans during Katrina and the year or 2, 3 after Katrina, it's a very different environment. I mean, we all went through this. We kind of know what's coming in a certain way. What are you seeing in terms of businesses maybe retooling or otherwise trying to confront this new environment that we're probably going to be facing for the next little while?
Yeah, well, we are definitely encouraging businesses to do that. And I think after the paralysis, that they go through and, at the onset of this thing, they've got to start to realize that, business will not be the same. So we are encouraging people to, look at what are some of the things, that within the realm of what you already do might be marketable services or products, in this new, post-COVID economy. And so where I'm seeing, construction contractors are now saying, well, we're going to go into, the cleaning business. So I'm, saying to them, you're going to have to do, start doing some research around, disinfectants and, how that affects people and, the legalities of that, looking at compliance with that, because that is an area where before everybody can go back to work, offices, retail spaces are all going to need to be cleaned and disinfected. Right. So that is a great opportunity for, businesses to get in on that, and figure out, where do you get the supplies like hazmat suits and, all of the cleaning materials. So, you've got to start thinking about those things now. So in a couple of months, hopefully that when they say everybody can go back to work, everything's going to have to be cleaned. Right. So just sort of think about, what are the things that look like, will be useful, like, what can we do to enhance supply chains? Logistics is something that's big. Any kind of I think we're going to see manufacturing pick up a lot in the United States because, what we realize is we've shipped everything out to everywhere else around the world. And then when we were really in need, we had to rely on getting things from areas that were hurting as much as we are, and then they're not able to ship the things that we've, contracted with them to make for us, right? So I mean, a lot of the, the healthcare, the PPE, that we're not able to get, the testing materials, the swabs, we're saying much of that is made in China, and now we can't get, these things that now that we need them. So I think we're going to see a trend where manufacturing is now going to come back to the United States. So, for people who could do, those kinds of, get into those kinds of industries, absolutely do it. 3D printing, we saw became very, very big, so where it might take a much longer time for a seamstress to make hospital gowns and masks and things like that, we've got those digital machines that can do it a lot quicker. So any of those things that can be automated, I mean, look at grocery e-commerce. I think now that people are saying, okay, well, I didn't really have to go to the supermarket and spend 2 hours. I can sit in bed in my pajamas and order, make a grocery order and have it shipped here. I mean, the same thing with, with restaurants. I mean, when we look at safety, especially as it relates to manufacturing and food and beverage, I mean, we're seeing, food factories now having to shut down, right? Because there were not safety measures in there that prevented people from being infected, with this virus. So any of those things that we see, they were problems, and in entrepreneurship, the entrepreneurs that win big are those who solve critical problems. And so all of the problems that we've seen that have come out of this COVID response, I think are things that are going to be, bigger industries that entrepreneurs can take advantage of. But, for sure, our economy is definitely going to change. So I'm just encouraging businesses to start looking at those trends and to see how they can pivot, diversify and move into other areas, to keep their businesses viable and above water.
Yeah, and if you are a small business, I mean, it's always not, you don't want to really think like this, but if you're a small business and you're an entrepreneur, you need market disruptions in order to be successful. And while you don't want to be excited about pandemics, this is an opportunity for small businesses to really be successful. There are going to be a lot of people who come out of this very successful. And so we want to do what we can to help position you for that. Obviously, right now, you know, when you've got certain parts of the economy shut down, or you've got stay-at-home orders or whatever else, there's only so much that can be done. But we've been using this time, and the people that we've been working with, to encourage them to think about this type of things that you're talking about is, how can you reposition, or how can you pivot some of the things you're doing to provide what we all know will be you know, much needed services or goods. So I'm looking to see if there are any other questions. Rachel, we've gone through the questions that are in the chat room. Were there other questions, Rachel, that you had that came in that you thought folks wanted answers to, or thoughts on?
Rachel somehow got booted out, but this is for Nancy. Someone did ask, and I know we had another question previous when people registered about sort of starting businesses at this time. Someone, Garrett asks, he says, I don't live there, but I'm thinking of moving down from New York. Are there options for someone relocating here to New Orleans to start or take over a business? And then someone else had asked about kind of, you know, how to focus on starting a new business, you know, right now.
Well, I mean, the climate is I think always there, but as so many businesses right now are trying to just survive and hang on, I think we're going to see a lot of the business assistance resources shifting into, you know, how do we, you know, intervene to make sure the businesses that are in business stay in business, right? So I think we're going to see a lot of the resources start to shift that way, and people may not be focused so much on new startups, but that's not to say that you can't do it. And I would say if you have something that will be viable in this new economy, by all means, go for it. Yeah, I would definitely say go for it. I mean, I just think that, you know, especially as people are trying to pivot, you know, that's going to be something new and more challenging for the existing businesses. So they're going to need a lot of help. I mean, I run a program through the Business Alliance where we're working with entrepreneurs of color in high growth potential businesses. Those that are at $1 million in annual revenue and above. And these businesses have a lot to lose. And so we are working with them around what are some other opportunities that you might have, you know, that you can pivot to, right? And helping them with, you know, financial models for what that might look like, you know, in the coming months, or, you know, to really sort of ask yourself, you know, those tough questions, you know, is what I'm doing in my business going to be relevant? You know, is anybody still going to need the services or the products that I'm, you know, currently producing? Is that still going to be a viable business model for me? And if it isn't, you should be looking for what are the next, you know, what are other opportunities that you actually can pursue, right? So this is really the time to really look at what you're doing and to figure out, is this still going to be viable? Will I still be able to, you know, run my business doing the same thing?
Right. And what trends are you guys seeing as far as kind of, you know, new opportunities? If someone is looking to start a business, kind of what are these trends coming out of all this time? You know, like you said, the sanitation and the, you know, cleaning, and, you know, what other sort of businesses would be trending right now?
Yeah, I'm going to say technology is just going to be huge, because people are now realizing, you know, we're going to be working from home. I'm going to say consulting businesses are going to be fairly usable for some of the larger businesses. I mean, just the fact that so many of us are now working from home, you know, our companies are now starting to see, well, wow, you know, we could do this without having to spend, you know, $20,000 a month in a business location, right? That's a substantial expense for, you know, for businesses. Maybe this is a new model, right? And so getting consultants who can consult with companies around, you know, what things they can now do in this new COVID environment, because, you know, what they're telling us is that we're going to see another wave of this. So even if we're able to, you know, reopen parts of the city and people will be able to go back to work in the next, you know, month or two, it may be that we may go right back on lockdown, you know, come the fall. So this may be a new way of how we work, right? A new way of working now. So I think consulting businesses that are looking at those trends, as much information as they're able to put together, that might be, something else that people can really look at, and helping businesses to employ strategies that, will be more efficient for companies to operate. Right.
Someone asked about mortgages and commercial real estate. I don't know, Lynette, if you've heard anything nationally about the federal government, say, encouraging banks or to push off mortgages. I know there's some talk of mortgage relief in terms of like a 3-month furlough, with then everything is due in month 4, which unfortunately I guess it's some help like right now, but if you have no income and then you get furloughed 3 months and you have to pay it all in month 4, that doesn't, like, I don't know where they think the money's going to magically materialize in month 4.
That's just moving a problem, right?
Yeah,
that's just moving your problem.
I have, in response to that, I have not heard anything. I haven't heard anything from the city on anything specific to New Orleans in terms of working with lenders. I mean, most of the stuff, the problem is it's national. I mean, these mortgages they're all over the place.
Yeah, and I mean that the only relief that I could see from a mandated perspective would be like federally backed loans, where the federal government may say through FHA or VA, they're requiring, a 3-month deferral, and then maybe putting that 3 months on the back of the loan so that, the individuals will not have to come up with that money, in month number 4. What we're seeing just sort of nationally, most of the banks are just doing a deferral, but in, month 4, they're going to want to have their money. And we saw this in Katrina. I will probably say some of the smaller community banks will be a little more lenient with this, mainly because of relationships. And we saw this after Katrina as well. So yeah, the thing that I've encouraged people to do is talk to your bank, give them your scenario. What is the case, feasibly, what do you think you're going to be able to do, and what is really your hardship, and see if your bank will work with you that way. But right now there's really no mandates, and banks are private entities, and nobody can really force them to do anything outside of those federally backed programs.
Yeah, someone asked about real estate more generally too, and Lynette, you were talking about technology and innovations in technology. I mean, I think you're going to see things happening on both sides, right? You've got sort of a high tech sort of opportunities there, but then you've also probably got a lot of opportunities that are going to be around providing the day-to-day services that people just need or want. And you've got to think about how they're going to be done a different way. I'm sure everyone, right? The joke is everyone knows a real estate agent, right? But think about the process of selling houses right now. I mean, if I put my house on the market and my family was still living in it, would I want a bunch of people walking through my house, on a Saturday afternoon, thinking about how listings normally take place? Is there an opportunity? I know that we've done certain things with virtual home tours and whatever else, but look, I mean, I bought a house a couple of years ago and those were terrible. I mean, there was no way to really experience what the house was like unless you went there. There might be an opportunity to do something here. If you have some skills in digital design or photography or something, no one's going to want to have a lot of people running through their houses to sell the house, at least not immediately. I mean, I think there might be some opportunity there. But I think that's where, if I was in a position where I'm trying, and look, I work in education, right? So let me not imagine what's happening in real estate or restaurants or businesses that I don't operate in. I work in education. And so we are faced right now with a number of challenges. And UNO has different sets of challenges than other places, but how do you deliver a college education, especially for them? Yeah, I run the Entrepreneurship Institute, but I'm a philosopher. How do you deliver how do you deliver an education for disciplines like philosophy that really it's about discussion? It's about, at least for a long time, it's about being together in the same room and talking about things. What about science labs? What about all of the recitals and other things in the art programs? How are we going to provide educational opportunities? Because it's one thing if you're talking about, say, finance, or you're talking about some subject where you can just have someone lecture like this, right? Or you can watch a video or something else. But I think of this as, me in education, there are going to be a lot of opportunities to figure out what education looks like. And I think it's not all, look, we're all going to go the University of Phoenix model. It's all going to be online. It's all going to be, because there are a lot of people who don't want that. You've got people who are paying $60, $70, $80,000 a year so they can go off in the middle of nowhere and live for 4 years on a residential college campus. There is a product that they want that right now they're probably not going to be able to get. So someone in my position in education has got to figure out, well, how am I going to be able to provide something like that to these people, because they've got a lot of resources and they're looking to spend them. How can I fit that need? And I think this is where if you're in real estate or you're in restaurant business or you're in whatever else, you've got to figure out, what do people want to spend money on? What are their concerns, and how do I provide those services now? I think, and that's going to be the challenge. And if you can figure that out, those are the folks who are going to be more successful, because people still want services.
Yeah, no, absolutely. You're right. And, just sort of looking at, not only what people want to spend money on, what will they have to spend money on, right?
Yeah.
And what are those problem issues are going to be, the real things that bubble up really quickly. So as much as we can start, looking at just like what you're just saying, just in your industry, what are the real changes that are happening? What are the things that we're going to have to solve for? What are the pain points? What are people really going to take issue with? I mean, when you just look at public schools, that what happens if things happen in September, and from September through February, kids may have to have education online. What happens with that? How do we continue to get meals, to kids? How do we support all of that? So I think those are the things that, people, if you're in that industry of technology with education, if you're just a consultant, who consults around education, those are the things that you should be thinking about now, because these are the problems that, educators are going to have to solve for in this new, COVID economy.
Yeah, and to add one point to that, you don't have to be, I remember Mistress Cleo on TV. Remember, she could predict the future and whatever else. I don't think you can get Miss Cleo on this and to try to imagine necessarily like whether something's going to come back, or whether, like, people are going to be concerned about this, whether or not there's a round 2 of this in the fall, or like, this is going to be on people's radars. And so you don't have to predict the future to understand what people are concerned about right now. And again, we had this experience in 2005, 2006, 2007, right? Yeah. That affected people. It's going to take a long time for people to forget about this.
Absolutely right. And then if you build a better mousetrap now, the old mousetrap will go away.
That's correct.
Right? That's if correct. You build a better one today, nobody's going to use the old one. So, the things that, and solutions that we come up with now will probably be solutions that we continue to use, into the future, right? So I think, as we have these huge, events that shift society, society makes a shift along with it, So I don't, know that we should be looking, in our rearview mirror at what was, because I think what is becoming will become our new normal.
Yeah, if folks have other questions, there's a chat feature on Zoom. You can type them into the chat. We've got about 15, 20 minutes left. We're happy to answer the questions. Can more than one SBA PPP loan be applied for at separate banks? In other words, can you apply at Citibank and also apply at Chase? Lynette, you might want to talk about this. You can get it approved, but the problem is the banks are processing them at different rates. And so,
yeah, and the thing is that once SBA receives your application, there is a number attached to your application. That goes along with your business tax ID number. So that tax ID number, just as you file your taxes online, if you've already filed and somebody has used that social security number, it's going to reject it. And that's the same thing that will happen with these PPP loans. Once your tax ID number, or if you're a 1099 person, your social security number goes in, it's done. So if that same tax ID number or social security number hits the SBA system, it's going to reject it. So you can only apply for one time. Now, if you are an owner of more than one business, you can apply, for both businesses, right? But your businesses will have a different tax ID number.
What's been your experience in terms of how fast these banks are processing loans? What we found is that people who have relationships with the banks they're the ones who are getting these loans processed. They're getting to the front of the line. And then if you don't, then you're much better off going to a local credit union or something much smaller than trying to say, go
Yeah.
through the Chase portal. If you don't have some pull, you know, I mean, we got 2 people through Chase, and then a couple of folks through some smaller community banks, but it's all people who had, you know, existing relationships. What are you finding?
Well, I mean, as we're seeing in the national news every day, these larger businesses, you know, the larger banks prioritize the bigger loans, right? Because these banks actually are getting fees, and not small fees, to do these loans, right? So there was a conversation in one meeting I was in where people say, well, you know, is initially they were 0.5%. Can banks really do loans at 0.5%? And what do they get out of this for doing this? Well, the government is paying banks big fees. They're getting anywhere from 1 to 5 basis points, which means 1% of the loans that they do, right? So loans up to 350,000, banks get 5% of that loan as just a fee for doing the loan. You know, between 350 and $1 million, it's 3 basis points, and then 1 basis points for everything over $1 million. So what the banks have prioritized, what they've seen is if I do a $10 million loan, one $10 million loan will get me a fee that's bigger than if I did 10 or 13 of those smaller loans. Right, so it was just really like efficiency for them. The less work I do, I still can end up with the same amount of fees that I'm getting from the loans, right? So your smaller banks did something a little bit different because they're normally working with, you know, they're much smaller businesses. So I know Chris at UNO is working with Hope Credit Union, and now we're starting to see where some of the fintech companies like PayPal and Square, they have now come on and they're going to be doing these loans. And these are people who normally work with the very small businesses. So, I mean, where we trusted our banks to do the right thing, they still didn't. You know, we trusted our big corporations to do the right thing, they still didn't. And, you know, where everybody knew money was really intended to get down to Main Street, to our mom and pops, that still didn't happen. So hopefully now in the new legislation, you know, they're putting some language in there that will make it so there's a certain amount of money that has to be here for our smaller companies to make sure that they get access to, to what they need. And, you know, of course, these larger companies, they have lawyers and accountants and all of these people who manage all of this information for them. So it's nothing for them to pick up a phone and say, get our application in, right? And they were able to do that. So I just hope, you know, we're going to see something that works a lot better and works in the favor of our much smaller businesses.
Lynette, you may know the answer to the question. Have you seen anyone who is a 1099 employee getting 1099 income? I don't think any of them ended up getting approved because the money was on before
they started. And they had to start a whole week later, right? Yeah. So where I have seen some small businesses have gotten PPP loans back from some of the local banks. I have seen them getting that. I still have not heard of anybody getting the grant from the EIDL loan. I still have not heard of anybody who's gotten money from the EIDL loan. So the PPP seems to be working. It should be a faster process, and money is hitting the street from that. I just think, you know, our smaller businesses have to get in there and get their applications in.
Yeah, I know some sole proprietors who were able to file and get some PPP, and some very some smaller businesses in addition to the ones you're hearing about. I don't know, Francie. I don't know if Shake Shack got a lot of news from getting money in the PPP, and they're returning their $10 million. I don't know if that gets put back into the pot or not. But hopefully they'll approve the larger allocation, and then you've got a lot of folks in line. Let me see. So there was a question about someone who is living in New York or otherwise living outside of New Orleans who is thinking about moving to New Orleans. Lynette, are there resources that are New Orleans specific right now that are for people who are trying to start businesses, or are you looking to that we are seeing the resources right now being trying to keep the businesses that we have afloat and paying people mostly?
Yeah, I think monetarily, there's not going to be money for startups right now. I think much of the money's shifting. I mean, I do a program where it's funded by JP Morgan Chase, and what they came back to say, you know, as the COVID response several cities are participating in this program. They basically said, you know, intervene in these businesses to make sure that these businesses don't go by the wayside. So I think we're going to see a lot of the business assistance now start to shift to the existing businesses and helping these businesses to stay in business.
Yeah, and it doesn't mean that if you see an opportunity, you can't come down and provide a need. You know, that's one of the things that sole proprietors have an advantage of, is that you can be pretty nimble. So if you've got an idea for something that you think there's a need for in the community, you know, there probably not going to be a lot in the way of grants in terms of helping you to get your business started. But
No,
you know,
I mean,
look, I'm convinced that anyone who hustles in a time of opportunity like this is going to do okay if they're providing a service that people need. So
yeah. I think the hustle is everywhere now, though. You know, normally a disaster happens and there's a region, a state, a city that's impacted, but it's everywhere now, right? So everybody's in the same hustle at this point.
So what are the other organizations, Lynette, that folks could go to? I mean, you mentioned, you know, going on Google, but can you give a quick list of organizations that you know of in Louisiana that are coordinating these efforts, or where there are resources, like the Chamber of Commerce? What are other, you know, the New Orleans Business Alliance, obviously. What are other organizations in the state that you would suggest people look at first, because you've worked with them and you know that they're serious and responsive?
Well, you know, first off, there's a plethora of like small business development centers. You know, there are incubators and you know, accelerator programs, co-working spaces that all, you know, do some kind of programming that helps small business owners. So I'll tell you a good place to start, though. Locally in New Orleans, on the New Orleans Business Alliance website, we have a tool that we call the Crescent City Biz Connector. It is a list of all of the business organizations that provide assistance to businesses, whether it's financial assistance, whether it's, you know, chambers of commerce for advocacy, you know, whether it's you know, accelerators, or just, you know, general business assistance. But on that tool, you can, you know, say what industry you're in, what kind of help you might be interested in, and it will give you a drop-down list of organizations that are serving, and that can help you. Beyond that, there is a full listing that you could go through. And then we also have a new list that, you know, we've done a survey with the ESOs, or entrepreneurial support organizations here, to find out what are you doing and how are you serving businesses now. So, you know, there's a list of those organizations, that what they're doing virtually, how they're operating, you know, whether you could, you know, check in at a certain time, or if you actually need to make an appointment with them, and what kind of services they're providing. There's a list of webinars. GNO Inc. has a list on their website of just webinars that people are having, you know, throughout the city, throughout the state. But all of your, pretty much, you know, the city, New Orleans has a fantastic website with a number of resources, and I think most cities have done that. And your state economic development organizations as well. So I would say those are great places to start, you know, on your public websites first off, you know, and they'll, you know, usually get you out to some of the other organizations that that will be helpful for you. But the usual suspects that helps businesses pretty much have found a way to, you know, to still provide assistance. And many of our providers here in New Orleans have stepped up to the plate, and they are still servicing people.
Yeah, you know, we can criticize the PPP in terms of who ended up getting some of the money, and someone asked about whether it would help to lobby the senators and representatives about the funds going to small businesses. I mean, look, the government definition of a small business is something that has 500 employees or less. And so then when you say that, look, it's something that has 500 employees and less, then if you have multiple locations, you can look at how many people are in each of those locations. I mean, the last time the government had payment programs, the government was criticized for putting too many strings on the money, making it too difficult to access. And now this time, it kind of went the other way, right? That it was in some ways too easy to access by a lot of these, you know, they're technically maybe small businesses, but they're not really small businesses. And so when those companies started accessing the money, it depletes the resources very quickly. And so I think part of this is, you know, it's folks trying to get this right. I think folks probably should have anticipated who was going to be making the requests and how long or not long the money was going to last. But it's tough. I mean, there was, you know, I think there people took the criticisms from the last time into account this time and made it easier to get the money. But I don't know if you have other thoughts on that. I'm not sure it helps anyone to, I mean, people know this was a problem. Like, everyone knows that, this money did not go to most of it. Some of it did, but the vast majority of it didn't go to the places that if you thought it was supposed to go, like the regular person on the street, where's it supposed to go? The bulk of it didn't go there. People know it's a problem. My hope is that, it by pumping more into it, right, the other folks who can get help, I don't know if they're going to put additional strings. I haven't heard any additional strings that they're going to put on the second round. Have you heard? They were talking about that more was going to go to small credit unions and more was going to go to additional strings. I mean, there sounds like they're still hammering all that out.
Well, that is one of the things that did come out of this. And I think, for the lobbying, I'm going to say, yes, you should always advocate for small businesses and to let your legislators know, that you're out there and that you really do need the help. And the more people, that put that kind of message out, then they've got to do something. And basically with this second round, that's what we're seeing, that, the larger banks took care of their big, large clients, and the smaller banks took care of communities. So now they're making sure that they're allotting more money to the smaller banks, smaller communities who are responding to, these smaller community-based businesses. So yeah, I think, to lobby them is never a bad thing, to let them know that you're out there, what your issues are, right? We've got to vote for them, right? And if they want our vote, they need to make sure that they're taking care of us as their constituents.
Yeah, and again, a lot of it too, and we can send out this information, is to try to take advantage of the resources that are out there and to try to get in line. Try to be at the front of the line if possible. There's unemployment resources that are available that if you are not, say, necessarily a small business owner, but you qualify for unemployment, you should be looking into that. There are resources there. I mean, sometimes it's tough to navigate that system, so we can try to help with the small business stuff. Any other questions? I was checking my email. I've gotten a couple by email. Folks asking Lynette about people who say, independent contractor who works from home but can't get paid now because of social distancing and can't meet with clients, let's say, because they have some sort of medical condition. I mean, quite frankly, that's what the PPP was set up for. Someone in that situation who can now not work, to try to get you through for those 8 weeks until we figure out, hopefully 8 weeks from now, or 4 weeks from now, since it's 4 weeks backdated, that things will be better. But I think that's about it. Any final thoughts, Lynette? I mean, any suggestions or any glimmers of hope? I always
we're going to come out of this, right? I mean, we went through this in Katrina, and, it felt really, really bad in the beginning. But, I see, disasters bring out for the most part, the best in people. And I think, if where we're seeing, some of the things that we weren't expecting to happen, it just makes us better for the future. So we'll know, the things not to do and to make sure that we're servicing everybody. I know there were some questions on here about hospitality and when it might come back. And I would say that's one of my real concerns, is the hospitality industry for New Orleans. Just the uncertainty of what's happening, travel, tourism, conventions. I just don't think people are going to be in the mind frame to want to jump on a plane, next week. As soon as they start to say cities are opening, okay, we're ready to travel again. I think we're going to see that's going to take a much longer time to come back. And knowing that that's the big industry for us, that's probably one of my greatest concerns. But, we're going to come out of this, and, hopefully we're going to come out of this for the better. We will have learned more, and I think we're going to be better prepared for the next disaster.
That sounds great. Rachel, and you guys, you want to add something else? But thank you all for doing this. Again, if you have any questions for me or you want this additional information, it should be available on the Alumni Association website. You can always reach out to me, find my email address online, send me an email. I'll get back to you and try to connect you with this information. Rachel, I think we're putting together a list of resources either on the Matrix or somewhere else where folks can go. If you do have skills or services or something that you are willing to provide to people, If you're a CPA or you're an attorney or you do tax work or something, and you're interested in donating some of your time to some of these businesses who need this assistance, please let me know. We can try to connect you with some people who need help. And then I think we've got the matrix set up, Rachel, that folks can connect to provide other services and opportunities. But maybe you can talk more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. So if y'all, first of all, thank you for joining us, and thank you, Lynette and Chris. I mean, this was a lot of really great information, and I know we're going to be doing a follow-up email with the resources y'all talked about and links, as well as the information I'm about to talk about, which it has to do with a UNO alumni exclusive opportunity. So we run a platform now called the UNO Matrix. The UNO Matrix, it's almost like an internal LinkedIn, but it offers additional resources for businesses, and it's a UNO alumni-based platform. So join unomatrix.com, and there is the opportunity within that platform to do a number of things. So you can connect with people to either offer services or mentorship or guidance, or to connect with people who can provide said services and guidance to you. So connecting with other alums all over the country in different industry areas. Also, we have a business directory that we just launched. So it's a UNO alumni-owned or operated business directory where you can upload your logo, the types of services you provide. If you'd like to offer any kind of offers or opportunities to UNO students or alumni, you can promote those there. And we're going to be promoting that very heavily through the Alumni Association channels, as well as our campus news and our UNO campus channels. So I'd highly recommend to get on unomatrix.com, register yourself, but then also register and profile your business on that page.
Awesome. And I can be found at nolaba.org. Click on staff and you can send me an email.
Okay, well, thank you all and good luck, and expect to see more information from us in response to this program, but also other virtual events, webinars, both informative and fun, coming your way in the next month or so. Okay, take care. Thanks again, y'all.
Okay, thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Chris.